Da.
This week in Costa Rica is happy to welcome Jim Just. Jim is originally from the U.S. Pacific Coast, having lived in all three western states, California, Washington, and Oregon, and in that order. Jim and his wife moved to Costa Rica about 2.5 years ago and has been living high on the Cajon Ridge of the Poas volcano right above Grecia ever since. He has put together a book of poetry that really captures the soul and essence of Costa Rica called A Year of Days. We are excited to welcome Jim to the show. Jim, thanks for taking the time to come on the show today. I'd like to start off by giving the listeners a background into who you are. Can you tell us a little bit about your past and what brought you to Costa Rica?
Sure, Dan, and thanks for having me on the show. My wife and I, Irina, lived on a farm in Oregon for 20 years, raising wine grapes and sheep and ducks. And one day I just looking forward to a fall of preparing firewood and another year of pruning grapes in the winter. I just said to Irina, I think I'm done. And she said, well, where are we going next? And here we are in Costa Rica.
Beautiful. Well, I mean, I'm sure it wasn't too much of a going from the cold winters there down to a nice warm climate here. Jim, what was your inspiration for A Year of Days?
When Irina and I first met, we ran off and lived for a year in the south of France. And coming back later, we picked up a book called A Year in Provence by Peter Mayle. And we thought, I thought that book was terrific. And Peter Mayle just captured the enchantment of living in the south of France, and we found it to be just a terrifically accurate. It was just like our experience in the south of France. And when we got to Costa Rica, and I felt compelled to begin writing poetry again, I want to do the same thing for Costa Rica that Peter Mayle did for the south of France, hopefully without the same kind of consequences, because after writing about Provence, there was an influx of people who wanted to live in Provence, so hopefully that won't happen here.
Well, I think there's a lot of expats that already know about Costa Rica, but I'm sure it will really give them a taste of what you've experienced in your day-to-day life. Your poems are about ordinary life, weather, eating, drinking, work, encounters with people, plants, animals. Would you read one to us, perhaps one of your favorites?
Sure. This one is called Oblivious. Sloped field, old coffee trees ripped out during the dry season. One man, chainsaw screaming, trims back poro trees sinking just the right amount of shade. Another drags the limbs away, getting ready to replant. Above their heads, a Hoffman's woodpecker, speckled back, gold and nape, female, no red, hops along a dead branch.
Wow, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. When did you start writing poetry?
I started writing poetry as a young man. I actually went off to the Sierras to spend a winter in the Sierras and write poetry. I soon discovered that how could I write poetry? I hadn't even lived. I didn't know what I didn't have anything to write about. So I kind of put it aside for a while and lived my life. And now I feel I have it's time to write about it.
Right, based on your experiences, etc. Jim, can you talk about what a typical day consists of for you in Costa Rica, and how does writing poetry fit into your day?
Well, we get up early. I fix coffee for my wife. And then 9 o'clock or so, I go down to my studio and write for two and a half hours. And then we have lunch, and so I really dedicate my morning to writing. That's the time that I've set aside to do that every day.
Beautiful, beautiful. I think that's a great way to spend a morning. To give our listeners a little more taste of A Year of Days, would you read one more poem for us?
Sure. This one is called La Fiesta. Table brought, dishes strewn, chips, dips, salsas, salads, kids run playing games. Budding pair hold hands. seek solitude the whole time, blind to all but each other. Old folks sit talking, tables under the rancho. Two men at the parrilla, salchichon, chorizo split, chicken in pieces, tongue to the middle, corn, tortillas, grilled warm, offered on a tray by a woman making rounds. Iced beer, Imperial, Bavaria, Tonia from Nicaragua, lubricated karaoke, Espanol, Inglés, lots of ticos, spent time in New Jersey.
Wow, that's great. Well, now I'm both hungry and thirsty. Thank you. You've written about life in Costa Rica in A Year of Days. Is there anything you're working on currently that we should expect in the future?
Well, during the course of my wanderings to be a poet, I did write now and then. So I'm kind of going back and collecting and reworking some of that work, and I'm planning on integrating some of that older work into my next book of poems, which again will be about life here in Costa Rica.
That is great. And now that our listeners are wanting to get a copy of your book, can you tell us where one can get a book of a year, or one can get your book, A Year of Days?
Sure, it's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, iTunes for ebooks. And Amazon has the printed book, and they do a terrific job of getting books from the States here delivered in Costa Rica.
Perfect. And we'll also have all those links on This Week in Costa Rica for our listeners to be able to reach out and get one of those from you. Jim, thank you very much for taking the time to talk about A Year of Days with us. And again, we'll have the links to obtain a copy of this on This Week in Costa Rica. Thanks for taking the time today.
Thanks to you, Dan.
Well, that wraps up another edition of This Week in Costa Rica. I want to thank my guests for appearing on the show, Rico from Q Costa Rica, and Jim Just, the author of A Year of Days. If you want more information about the topics we covered today, or to get in contact with Jim, all those links can be found on thisweekincostarica.com. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll be back next week for another edition of This Week in Costa Rica.
So you want to jump out your trick bag and ease on into your bag, but you ain't just exactly